Namaskar friends, welcome to session 58 in our course on operations management, and currently we are discussing the last week of our discussion. As all of you know that it is a 12-week course, and currently we are in the 12th week of discussion related to our course on operations management. As you are aware, in the last week our focus is on some advancements in the area of operations management, and we are learning the various tools and techniques which help us in better managing our operations or in better management of our operations. We have already seen the concept of JIT, that is JIT, as well as the concept of Kanban. Today we are going to start our discussion on materials requirement planning, which is an important part of operations management. And if you remember, in our previous week our complete focus was on materials management only, and we have seen that what is the objective, scope, responsibilities of the materials management department. Then we have seen the classification of materials based on ABC classification or VED classification. We have seen that we can classify the materials in any organization based on the value of these materials or components or parts, or based on the usage of these parts. Then we have seen that how much we must order, when we must order, what must be our ordering cycle. Then we have seen the production quantity model, through which we have seen that the material may not be arriving at our premises all at once, but we may have a production run through which we are receiving the material every day. So that was our basic summary of what we have already covered. But these days there are softwares available, there are advanced methods available which help the organizations in the better management of the materials. So as we see in today's session, the materials requirement planning, that is MRP, we are going to plan our materials in a better manner so that we are able to take advantage of the computational methods that are available at our discretion these days. So with the help of integrated systems, we can manage all the materials in an organization at a single place, or in other words we can say that there can be a central management system which can manage the complete supplies, the usage of the material within an organization. So instead of doing the things manually and doing the calculations of economic order quantity using mathematical formulae to calculate the economic order quantity, we can use a system which will automatically trigger the orders, that whenever the material or the quantity level goes beyond the reorder point, it will automatically trigger an email or an SMS to the supplier that we require this much quantity within a lead time of this many days or this many weeks. So that type of automated material management systems are these days available, and one of such systems is the materials requirement planning system, which we are trying to understand in today's session. So our primary aim is to understand that what is materials requirement planning, what will be the inputs to this system, what will be the output from this system, and how any organization can make use of the MRP system. So the complete discussion on MRP we have divided into two sessions. So we are going to cover the materials requirement planning. The first part we are going to cover today, and the next part we are going to cover in the next session. So let us start our discussion and try to understand the very definition of the concept of materials requirement planning. So on your screen you can see that materials requirement planning is determining the number of parts, components and materials needed to produce a product. For example, you can take maybe any simple product and you can see that what are the materials that are required for making that product. Simply we can take the example of a household wooden chair. So if we take the example of a chair, we require certainly wood for making the chair, or the carpenter will require a raw wood for making the chair. Then he will require certain nails, certain adhesives, then he may require certain tools that will be required for making the chair. So here we will break down the complete product into the individual components, and these components will be planned by the system, that when which component must be available in order to ensure the timely manufacturing of the product, that in our case can be a wooden chair. So the example of a wooden chair can be used to explain the concept of MRP, that you need to have wood, this much quantity of wood. So if you want to give a back support or maybe a cushion at the back, you require the cushioning material also. If you want to have a colored cloth, you require a colored cloth also on top of the cushion. So whatever are the materials that are going to go into the product, that will be planned in a very systematic manner. The orders will be placed automatically, the material will be received and received before it is required in the assembly process. So once again I am reading the definition that is given, the very first sentence that explains materials requirement planning. So the materials requirement planning is determining the number of parts, components, materials needed to produce a product. So first thing is we need to know that what is required to manufacture the product. MRP provides time scheduling information specifying when each of the materials, parts and components should be ordered or produced. So we are going to use the time domain also, that if we require the product to be ready by 30th of September, we need to do the offsetting, that when the individual components that are required to be assembled for making the product must be ready. From there we will offset that when the materials that are going to be used for making these components must be ordered, so that the sub-components can be produced by a deadline, and then finally these sub-components are assembled together to make the product by September 30th, 2017. So this will give us all the timeline, that when what must happen in order to ensure the completion of the manufacturing process by the due date. So here this will be automatically triggering the different points or the different checkpoints in order to ensure the timely delivery. Before delivery, I must say, the timely order of the materials, and then ensure the timely delivery of the materials, then the timely conversion of these materials into the final product. So in these two sentences we have tried to highlight the overall picture of materials requirement planning, that materials requirement planning is determining the number of parts, components and materials needed to produce a product, number one, and number two, provides time scheduling information specifying when each of the materials, parts and components must be ordered or produced. As per the Epic's dictionary, MRP constitutes a set of techniques that use bill of material, inventory data and the master production schedule to calculate the requirements for materials. Now some of you may be wondering that it is a very complicated definition, or maybe there are number of words that we do not know in this definition. Yes, true, some of the words may be new, as for example the bill of material. So we are going to understand what do we mean by bill of material. All of you know the inventory data. In week 11 we have used the one word inventory quite comprehensively. You know that what is inventory, what makes up the inventory, and what do we mean by inventory data, what is the service level, what is the safety stock. I think all this we have covered in week 11. So this inventory data is not new to you, but yes, the master production schedule may be new, maybe because we have covered this. I think in week 9 we have seen that what is a master production schedule, that also we have covered in one of the sessions. So we need these three inputs. We need master production schedule, we need the inventory data, we need the bill of materials. So all these three are the inputs to the master production to the materials requirement planning, MRP. So once we have these three data or these three inputs, the master production schedule will give us certain outputs. So outputs will be primary outputs as well as the secondary outputs that we will cover in the course of our discussion today as well as in the next session. So but basically, in order to use MRP, we require three types of inputs, and all these three types of inputs are given on your screen. That is the bill of materials, the inventory data, as well as the master production schedule. So now you can yourself imagine why this is required. The master production schedule will give us the time deadlines or the timeline of manufacturing of the individual components, which finally have to be assembled into the final product. Which machine is going to operate on which product, who is going to be operating that particular machine, all that will be there in the master production schedule. In the inventory data, we will have what is our inventory level available, what is the, you can say, Q, that is usually we call the order quantity available with us, what is the demand rate, how we are using our inventory, what is our safety stock, when is the next order going to arrive at our premises, all that will be the inventory data. That is what is the current status of materials available with us, that will be our inventory data. And the bill of materials is the first and the foremost thing that we must have. The bill of materials will give us that what is required. Suppose I have taken an example of a wooden chair. For a wooden chair, how much wood is required, how many nails are required, how much adhesive is required, how much cushion material is required, how much meter of clothes is required. So all that will be the bill of materials data. So we will try to understand all these three inputs one by one, that is what is bill of material, what is inventory, and what is the master production schedule, and how these will influence the overall materials requirement planning system. Now, material requirement planning system we are going to discuss based on a master production schedule. So one thing already all of us know, and we have already discussed it in week 9. Based on the master production schedule, a material requirement planning system, what it will do? Master production schedule is already available with us. So what will MRP do? It creates schedules identifying the specific parts and materials required to produce the end items. Now, end item is our final product. So we have to use certain specific parts and materials that will go into our final products. So MRP will create the schedules that once the final product has to be made, when the individual parts must be ready, when the sub assemblies must be ready, so that by the deadline our final product is ready. So MRP will create schedules identifying the specific parts and materials required to produce the end item, determines the exact unit numbers needed, then determines the dates when orders for those materials must be released based on the lead times. So now once we input based on the forecasted demand, based on the orders by the customer, if we input that this many number of products have to be produced by 31st of December 2017, the system will calculate that what is the requirement of the individual parts and components that need to be assembled for making the final product, when they must be ready, and in order to make these materials, what is the raw material required, when an order must be placed for this material, so that when we start the manufacturing of the individual parts and components, we have the raw material available with us. So offsetting will be done from the deadline. So deadline in this example that I have taken is 31st December 2017, and prior to that all back calculations will be done, and the system will automatically trigger the invoice or maybe an order to the suppliers that you have to supply the material by this and this date, then the manufacturing of that particular component will start, and finally this component will be assembled by the other component or assembled with the other component to finally make our product or consignment or our maybe the overall package ready for delivery. So the MRP system, we can say, will help us in creating or identifying the schedules for material procurement, material usage, then production. Also it is going to help us, as you have seen, that it determines the exact unit numbers needed. It will also determines the day, it will determine the dates when orders for those materials must be released based on the lead time. So lead time is that today if we order for a material, it may arrive at our organization after 10 days. So the 10-day will be the lead time for that material. So this also we will try to understand that what is a lead time and what is a manufacturing lead time. So it will help us to automatically control our materials management system so that we are at ease controlling the other aspects. The materials management part will be taken care by the MRP system. Now this is the MRP inputs. On your screen you can see from where will the system get an idea that how many parts have to be produced. So it will be from the sales forecast. So sales forecast is one important thing, that is an important part. Then the customer order. So we have two inputs for the master production schedule. So master production schedule will have the input that how many units have to be produced, and therefore I have highlighted this point earlier also, that all the things that we are discussing in operations management are interrelated to each other. How these are interrelated? If you remember, we have already discussed the concept of sales forecasting. What are the different methods of sales forecasting? If you remember, we have seen that there are qualitative methods of sales forecasting, there are quantitative methods of sales forecasting. So those forecasting methods will be helpful here. Once we identify that what is the exact amount of product or exact number of products that we have to produce, based on that the master production schedule will create a schedule that when the manufacturing must start in order to achieve the deadline of manufacturing a particular product. So we always work with deadlines in the company, so or in the organization. Here the MPS will take the input from sales forecast, or it may also get the input from the direct customers. Based on that, the master production schedule will create a schedule. So you can see the sales forecast is something where we are not directly interacting with the customers, but there can be companies which directly book orders from the customer. So that is, I think, a better method of our forecasting. So if we know what we have to produce, based on that we have our MPS system, that is a planning or a system or a schedule that will plan the manufacturing of our product, or the timeline will be fixed by the master production schedule, as we have seen in our previous session, in our previous discussion during week 9. So first input is the master production schedule. Second input is, as you can see, the inventory status file. So if you remember, as per the Epic's dictionary, we have seen that there are three inputs to the materials requirement planning. First one is, as per our diagram here we can see, the one is the master production schedule, the input to the MRP system. Then inventory status file is another input to the MRP system, and the bill of materials is another input to the MRP system. So in our Epic's dictionary, the definition we have seen that three inputs are there. As per that definition, the inputs were the master production schedule, the inventory data, as well as the bill of materials. So here again, These three inputs have been depicted graphically. That master production schedule is one input, but master production schedule has further inputs, that is the sales forecast and the customer's order. Based on that, we have the master production schedule, which is an input to the MRP system. Then inventory status file will give us the exact amount of materials available, what is the safety stock, all that data will be available in the inventory status file. And bill of materials will be that what exactly are the materials required. So MRP system then will give us the timeline, the order, when the order must be placed, how much must be the order. So all that thing that we calculated in the previous week using the EOQ model, using the production quantity model, those things will be automated in the MRP system. Things will be automatically triggered depending upon the level of inventory available in the organization. So bill of material, we will try to understand this with the help of a diagram in our subsequent slides today. We will see that what is a bill of material. So for any product, whatever is the individual requirement of parts and components will comprise the bill of material or will be a part of the bill of material. And once we have these three inputs, MRP system will generate output, and that output would be very helpful for the organizations to manage their operations. So inputs we have tried to understand. Now let us see the individual inputs, because I have explained in an abstract manner that what is bill of materials, what is inventory data, what is master production schedule. But now let us see them one by one, that what individual input to the MRP system is, and we better understand the concept that if we know that we have to implement a MRP system, we must know that what type of information we must have as an input, so that to take advantage of the versatility, take advantage of the maybe system that will help us in the better management of our operation. So let us take the first input, as we have seen, the master production schedule. So it is a list of items indicating end products to be produced. This contains item name, quantity to be produced, and the timings of completing the production. So you can see that master production schedule will give us the following information, which will be used by the materials requirement planning system. So it is a list of items indicating end products. So what we have to produce, that will be in the master production schedule. This contains the item name, that is the maybe the company name or the code, quantity to be produced. If you remember in the previous diagram, we have seen that sales forecasting is an input to the master production schedule. So that quantity, the number of products to be produced, can come from the sales forecast or directly from the customer orders. Quantity to be produced and the timing for completing the production. As I have taken an example that December 31st 2017 may be the due date for completing the production of a particular item. So that completion date must be known, and how much we have to produce, that must be known based on the estimations of product demand, that is sales forecast. So that we have already seen in the previous diagram, that master production schedule will take its input from sales forecasting or from the customer's order. So two things are important here in this slide. One thing is that we need to know the number or the quantity that is going to be produced, and the other thing, that is when that product has to be delivered or when that quantity has to be shipped or has to be delivered to our customer. So here we can see just one example of master production schedule for products P6 and P8. So there are two products. This is a code for the product, that is P6. Another product is P8. So we can see in the rows we have product 6, product 8, and then September. This is the weeks 1, 2, 3 and 4 week, where we can see in week 1 product 8 is required in the quantity 40, and in week 2 product 6 is required in the quantity 70, and in last week of September both are required in 160 quantities each, 100 for product 6 and 60 for product 8. So this is maybe a kind of master production schedule. Weekly demand or weekly production requirement is mentioned here, that what is the exact requirement for the product 6 and product 8 in the weekly basis for the month of September. Now this is a first input, that is master production schedule, which will go into the MRP system. The second input is the bill of materials file. What is the third input? I think very quickly I have asked, so all of you must know that there are three inputs basically for MRP system. First one is master production schedule, second one is the bill of materials, and third one is the inventory status file. So bill of materials file, you can see it provides a list of materials and their quantities required to produce the end items. Again, referring back to our example of production of a chair or manufacturing of a wooden chair, what are the individual components or parts required to manufacture the wooden chair will comprise of the bill of materials along with their quantities. So it provides a list of materials and their quantities required to produce the end items. It contains the list of finished products, material needed for each finished products in units, assembly structure, sub-assemblies, parts and material. So bill of material will give us maybe everything. For example, for making a table we require suppose 4 screws and 4 nuts, everything, 4 screws, 4 nuts, everything will be mentioned in the bill of material. What will be the tabletop, how many legs the table will have, what will be the material of the leg, all that will be mentioned. Suppose we are manufacturing a table, so all individual parts and component along with their quantity will be mentioned in the bill of material file. Bill of material file is revised every time there is a change in the product design or specification. So as soon as we change the design, for example, we are initially manufacturing a table with 3 legs or a 3-legged wooden table we are manufacturing. As soon as we change the design to 4 legs, our bill of material file has to change, because now we have 4 legs, a tabletop, maybe the dimensions of the tabletop may change, and therefore the material requirement for the tabletop as well as an additional leg will change. So therefore the bill of material file has to be revised whenever there is a design modification. So by now we know that what is the master production schedule, how it looks like, what is the bill of materials file, that we can try to understand with the help of this example. Here you can see, suppose we have to produce or manufacture product A. So we have sub-assembly 1, sub-assembly 2, sub-assembly 3, and these sub-assemblies are further made up of component X and Y, again X and Z, Y and Z, and there is one component Y that directly goes into product A. So here we know that there are 3 sub-assemblies. Each sub-assembly, what is the material requirement or what type of material is required and in what quantity it is required. So here we can see for each product A, X is required in 2 numbers, Y is required in 3 numbers, and Z is required in 2 numbers. So this way we can see that we have to always keep our bill of materials file ready in order to ensure that our materials requirement planning system functions properly. Then the third input is the inventory status file. So 3 inputs are there for any materials requirement planning system to work efficiently. 2 inputs already we have seen, the master production schedule and the bill of materials file. The last one is the inventory status file. It provides a computerized record of each material physically held in the system. So it is a computerized inventory management file that gives an idea about the inventory level available within the organization. There will be only one inventory status for individual material, even if it is used at different levels of production or in different end products. So every material will have single status only. This material may be required in 2 or 3 different products, but the level of material required, that is the quantity of material available in the factory or in the premises, will be same and it will be managed centrally. So again I am reading, I think there may be some confusion. There will only be one inventory status for every material. So status is, suppose 525 components of part B are available. So that 525 accounts for 525 parts, irrespective of that whether this part is being used in 3 different products or 5 different products. 525 is the central number available within the organization, even if it is used at different levels of production or in different end products. So that in the level has to be centrally the same. Now the inventory status file usually indicates the material code, it indicates the material name, inventory on hand, that is physically available with us, inventory on order, that is ordered but yet to arrive at our premises, and customer order for the item. So suppose there is a demand for a particular item within the organization, that data also the inventory status file must be able to update, and that will be used by the our materials requirement planning system for performing the planning operation of the materials, that what is the current status of the materials that are physically available, how much have been ordered. All this will be the input to the MRP system to plan for the future, that how and when, based on the master production schedule, what materials will be required, when they will be required, so that the production runs continuously. So basically we will have 3 inputs to any materials requirement planning system, and the 3 inputs we have discussed I think in detail. We know that we must have the master production schedule as an input, we must have the bill of materials as an input, and we must have the inventory status file as an input to the MRP system. And if we are able to accurately provide the information required by the MRP system, our system will be able to help us to better manage our procurement process, better manage our usage process, better manage our manufacturing or operations within the organization, which will lead to an improvement in the overall productivity, as well as the operations will be managed more efficiently and effectively without any stoppages or undue breakages in the overall process because of the lack of materials or the stock out of materials. So with this we come to the close of today's session. In our next session we will start our discussion from where we are leaving today. We will try to understand that what are the outputs of the MRP system, and we will also try to see that how the MRP system works and what are the advantages and limitations of the MRP system. Thank you.